how to write a successful job-seeking post on LinkedIn.
Teach me.
There's a good way to talk about yourself where you can be factual with other people about what you've accomplished, what your skills are, what you can do. You could extrapolate this to everything, content that you make, the way that you meet other people. But the point is,
get hired.
Today, we're going to touch base on some other things, which are also going to be relevant and a good continuation of our last discussion, which is how to boost your social media profile, where to look for relevant openings, what strategy to follow to increase your chances of hiring, how to build your own hireable brand. What should you do if you're an introvert and don't want to do a lot of social contacts, which a lot of us for sure are, and how to be prepared for an interview. So if you're excited, tune in. But before doing that, if you like our show, please subscribe, like, share, tell everyone, and let's be a better industry together. Amir, thank you so much for coming to the show. If anyone doesn't know Amir, Amir is Director of Business Development at Tencent, who also runs Amir Satvat's community, which has how many participants, Amir? Tell us.
every month across all the different sites we have 500,000 users, and we've had over 5 million users lifetime over 3 years.
Wait, 5 million users? But didn't you say there's only a little over 500,000 people in the industry? So
I am confident in saying that over 500,000 people work in games worldwide.
are you saying you guys are more exposed outside of a gaming industry now than just being focused on gaming industry?
Definitely. So where I get that number is what's actually cool on LinkedIn is if you go to your impressions, you can look over a year and see how many unique people have looked at your content over the course of the year. And so if I take those stats, most of it is on LinkedIn, some on the site, some on Discord, but that is in fact the general traction we have on LinkedIn across a very diverse group of people.
We're beyond excited to bring this episode in partnership with Devoted Fusion. If you're a gaming studio hunting for insanely talented freelance artists, or you're an artist searching for a new gig, Devoted Fusion makes it super easy to connect and work on projects together. We take care of payments, paperwork, everything that people hate, so everybody can work and focus on creating the best content they can. If you're interested, check the link in the description of the video.
When we dive into your experience or the next phase of our conversation, I always love to start, how did you get your first job in the gaming industry? What helped you and what could others learn from you?
It's very interesting how I got my first job in games because it wasn't until age 38. And there's a few things to learn from this. One is that you don't need to have not working in games to find your identity. I never felt like I was any less than being a gamer or loving the industry just because I didn't work in it. Second is be authentic to what's important to you. Until I got my job in games, what was most important to me was my family and the Persian community that I care about and my friends. And that's why I didn't want to move from the East Coast. That was my decision to own. The third thing I would say is never give up on that goal and always think about what skills you're developing. I knew this was the goal, and so I kept staying sharp on learning about the industry, building my skills in business and strategy and so forth, because I hoped when I finally had the chance, I'd be ready. And the final thing is I got that job at Amazon and Prime Gaming. I was already working at Amazon and AWS. And so what I often tell people is it's a lot easier to make an internal move within a company that has a games division where you already have trust and have shown you're good rather than coming straight in from the outside. So I think all of those things helped me.
What do you feel like felt transferable from your previous experience into games? What did you have to learn? And like vice versa for folks transitioning out because of having a hard time finding a job, what should they expect? Or what should, be maybe feeling good about?
When I finally broke through and got my job in Prime Gaming, the job description for the role that I applied to, 10 to 15 years or more in business development, a whole bunch of other things, MBA, yada, yada, yada. I matched everything on the job description except the experience wasn't in games. So the only thing that I had to make the person take a leap of faith on is that I could do what I had done in other verticals like technology or healthcare in games. So I was only making them take one jump sideways. Let's say I was applying to that role and I also didn't have that work experience in BD, or I hadn't done certain deals or whatever they were looking for. Now you're asking someone to take two leaps of faith on you. And so I think that there's kind of two important parts to this. One is as few leaps of faith as possible, ideally 0 or 1. The second thing is spending your time knowing what those other roles are. And certainly our community, like many others, tries to help. But, a lot of people, if they're in games, may not have looked for another job outside games in their whole career, because maybe that's all they've ever done. And for those who are outside games, maybe they've never researched what type of jobs they could get in games. And so I think a lot of this is not just stuff you're doing at the time that you, God forbid, are laid off or looking for a job, but spending time all the time just knowing what jobs you're qualified for in any industry, given your skills.
If I can't find a job as an artist, like where do I go find a job?
It is tricky, but there are a lot of good crossover jobs. I give a lot of credit for this to, so a good friend I have named Mayank Grover, who also runs a great community called Outscal. Mayank and his team and I work together, and to directly answer your question, we said if you're an artist or any field and you want to know what jobs are in other fields, we started by trying to track what kinds of jobs are that map to the same skills in art in other fields. And again, we started with the first adjacency, which is technology. I think you'll find that there are a lot of jobs in art or in animation in other fields. A lot of fields also have art jobs, but they may not call it art. They might call it design or call it something like that. And so I think it takes a little bit of creativity, but having looked at this for some time, there definitely are jobs, just takes a little bit of investigation.
Do you have any up-to-date statistics on how many candidates are looking for jobs right now? And what are the areas it's easier to get a job? What are the geographies it's easier to get jobs? Where maybe, parts of your career it's easier to get a job?
So the headline statistics I often quote is over 12 months for anybody seeking work in games. And again, these odds are tough because they skew towards early career where there's many, many applicants. About 15% of people who look for games work will find it over a year. That's about 5% for early career. It's 30 to 40% for veterans. And it's a little bit harder as well for those who get much later on in their career and experience. In terms of where the jobs are, I would say 25% of the jobs are in North America, 75% are everywhere else. The largest area with jobs is Asia currently, and China is the largest country in terms of jobs. In terms of roles, I came up with my own classification, which is not rocket science, but I wanted everything to be apples to apples. So I have 20 categories for how I look at games. 4 of those, which I call the big 4, classically have 70 to 75% of the jobs.
Sounds like an audit firm, the big 4.
Yeah, I never thought. I love that. So 70 to 75% of the roles in games are typically in 4 areas: production, engineering/programming, game design, and art animation cinematics. That's 70 to 75% of the jobs in games. Of the 20 specialties, the one that is the relatively easiest to get a job in is the engineering tech one. The hardest one is writing a narrative. So to put this in perspective, it is 22 times harder to getting a job in writing a narrative than it is in engineering or tech. So it varies a lot by functional area. But the reason for that is most of that comes down to job availability. So for example, at any one point in time in the entire world, there's only about 50 to 60 jobs in writing a narrative, and that's it.
There's more contract jobs that are being available on the market than full-time. Is that a correct assessment?
Yes. So as we talked about in our last discussion, the good part of the news is total employment in games, to the best of my knowledge, is in fact increasing. And total number of open roles and role closures of people getting jobs is also accelerating. These are good things. The challenge is more of those roles are becoming available outside North America. And it also means they're becoming available at wage levels that are lower than what people in North America would typically be used to. Not to mention, as you and I both know, it often is hard to access those jobs because you have to think about visas and other geographic considerations.
Amir knows we built a platform called Devoted Fusion, which allows to hire contract artists, find them for smaller jobs or for a long period of time, but gives a big variability of talent and gives job security for people and ability to pay rent, which is all we stand for, is making sure that people are taken care of. So check it out on your spare time if you're looking for artists or if you're an artist that's looking for a contract job. Let's dive into brand and personal brand, which is the terrifying word for any introvert. So we talk about being the defensibility of you as a candidate against layoffs or the turmoil of the industry. So how where do you start if you want to build a personal brand?
I think that understandably, and I totally empathize with this because this has always been a challenge for me too, you get bound up in all these big words like networking, buzzwords, posting, social media, whatever. What I say to people is
creator.
What I tell people is pull the camera back and just think about it this way. Think about Amir. Think about Nanel. There is some hiring manager or recruiter out there who's like, boy, I'm looking for a great candidate. Imagine that you are a perfect fit for that opportunity, but the person has never met you, has never heard of you, etc. To me, it's a thought process of saying to yourself, what things would I do so that person can hear of me? Because we have a ton of data that suggests if they at least have some familiarity with you, that helps a lot. Here's how hiring happens in most situations that I know of. Someone has a role that they really care about and they want to hire. I and many other people like you whom they respect will get a phone call. Hey, Nanel, do you know anybody good for this role? Hey, Amir,
I get those all the time.
All the time. So case in point, if you've met somebody, Nanel, and you think they're a great candidate, they are going to have a better chance versus someone who's not recognized. So what do you do to do that? You need to be perpetually thinking about your brand and your visibility out there. That may seem overwhelming, but I actually find it less overwhelming because then it's like, well, okay, if I have a job right now, let's say I have a 1-year plan to put myself out there. Now it's not like there's urgency and things can go wrong. You already have a job. So what is my plan? I can go meet people. I can go to events. I can go to small meetups. I can put something on social media. I can make comments on social media. I can get involved in Discords. I can get involved in game jams. All of these types of things, I would make it as simple as saying, what things allow people to know who you are and to meet you and to discover who you are? Because the more people that do that and have a positive impression when they think about your name, that will help your job search chances.
What is desirable in the candidate in the 2025? Like and you see a lot of people that are being hired, like who do I need to be to get hired?
One thing I often tell people in the community, and I say it very gently because a lot of people are going through a lot of hurt right now, is I say to them, if you are really looking for a job, you want to project positivity all the time. You want someone to think, is this person going to lift my energy or is this person going to drain my energy? Which is why I always tell people, if you're really in job searching mode, be positive. Be positive about things you've accomplished. Be positive about your search. Don't say how frustrated you are. Don't say things that are super negative and dark, in my opinion. That's point number one. Point number two is, a good example of this is on our website, amirsatvat.com, we have a resource library. And within that resource library, I have a post that I think a lot of people, I'm grateful, got a lot of use out of, that is called How to Write a Successful Job-Seeking Post on LinkedIn. You could extrapolate this to everything, content that you make, the way that you meet other people. But the point is, without sounding like a robot, I think there's a good way to talk about yourself where you can be factual with other people about what you've accomplished, what your skills are, what you can do. And you learn this balance over time, I think, between talking about your strengths without sounding braggy or without sounding kind of obnoxious. And it's that sweet spot.
Teach me, because I don't know how to do that. Like every time I'm like sharing about something, even for me, feels like I'm bragging, and I hate that. Like I don't, because I feel like bragging feels excluding.
It's definitely tough. And I know people feel like when they share, oh, is this cringe? Is it annoying? Is it braggy? I'll give you an example. So I'll put myself on the spot, right? For our community, as you know, I talk about our community and what we're doing together a lot. I'll talk about things that we've accomplished. I'll talk about the number of followers we have. When we have a big win or something like that, I'll celebrate it. The reason I do this is because pragmatically, I don't like doing it either. And believe it or not, and I swear this is true, I have to like bite my tongue a little bit every time I do one of these things, but I do it because I tell myself the end goal of this is more visibility helps our community, and that ends up helping more people. And so what I would say is, again, the same way that no one would know who you are, Nanelle, or would not know who I am unless we put ourselves out there. Let's say, for example, you kick butt at production and you made 3 different AAA games and they were outstanding and they made huge amounts of money. You can either hope that someone reads carefully enough to read that on your resume or see it on your profile, which they might, or you can carefully, in a nice way, talk about it. Maybe even better. Maybe you tie talking about that to an interesting post or comment about something you learned that is a good learning or something for someone else. And they're like, oh, that's super interesting. So it's all about trying to take chance away and putting information in front of people that they actually might find interesting. And if I'm hiring or if I'm your friend, frankly, if you shared something with me about a big win that you have, my genuine reaction would never be, oh, that's bragging. I'd be like, man, Nanelle kicks butt. And like, here's another example of how she kicks butt. So some people, no matter what you do, some people will say it annoying. They'll think it's braggy. They'll think it's cringe. But I think the vast majority of people, if you do it right, just realize that's part of how you share yourself professionally.
Okay. Well, that's empowering. So brag more, but brag genuinely. I guess that's...
Yeah, brag judiciously and brag with a purpose. You know, at the end of the day, like, you know, I think that's cool. And I might say another thing, which is, you know, and I really believe this, the way you present yourself really has an impact on a lot of people. So I tell you this not just because you're my friend and I really like you, but as a successful, if you don't mind me saying so, female entrepreneur, when you talk about things that you do that you've accomplished, other women out there who want to have their shot, they feel inspired by what you've done. And you and I can think of many people, and not just that one vector of your identity, but there's many vectors of your identity that when you say something, it means a lot to a lot of people. And so like, I think realize that you're not just talking for you. If you do it right, you're potentially delivering a positive message to many people.
What else needs to be built within the brand of a human to be more desirable? Anything on the hard skills, soft skills, maybe soft skills specifically?
Something I like to talk about a lot is about approachability, right? And again, these things, people know fake when they see it. So these things take practice to be true to yourself, but to be authentic. I, for example, think more than maybe a lot of our peers on LinkedIn or in any industry, I like to be very authentic. My whole life, for example, is about my family first and foremost. And I'm a kind of quirky guy. I really love the games industry. I love random things like classical music. I love the outdoors. And so as I'm sure as you see in my content, mixed with very deep, heavy, intense statistical stuff, I'll make a post about how I went to like a ball pit or I went to like the gym with like my children and we had like a good time. I think being real and giving people a sense that you're a 3-dimensional person and you're not like a resume that came out of like Harvard Business School, in my opinion, I think that's also cool. And I think especially in this day and age where people are going through a lot, I think having a sense of relatability to others is really, really important.
Anything that you feel have helped folks during the interview process that you feel people should lean onto?
The most rigorous interview process that I've seen so far was the one that I went through at Amazon. And the reason I think this is a good example is Amazon has a series of values that they call leadership principles. And they do this, I think, particularly well, but they're the types of things that transfer to any organization, like ownership, so taking responsibility, deliver results, like how do you actually give impact to people? And so what I always tell people is, and I know this seems a little bit over the top, but it really, I think, works is, and I developed this actually because this was during COVID, right? When interviews were virtual. So it was much easier to have like a piece of paper next to you for a reference. But it's the mindset. I would take a piece of paper. I would take each of these different values and leadership principles that Amazon had. And even if you don't want to do it the Amazon way, you could put different things that the person is probably going to ask about during the interview. Let's say you're an engineer. They might ask questions about technical things around coding. They might ask about projects you've worked on. They might ask about the previous employers you've been at, and so forth and so on. What I then do is I make a column, and for each of those areas of discussion that I think they might ask for examples on, I challenge myself to write down at least 3 examples of stories that I have that I can tell for each example. Then it takes not that much work, I promise. I memorize the stories, but I do it enough times that by the time I do the interview, it's crammed into my head, so it's natural. And again, I don't sound like a robot. And so I think that that's really important. One other thing about interviews that doesn't get enough attention is I actually think something that really matters is the questions. More times than you would believe, and I did, 200 plus interviews at Amazon. I've probably done over 500 in my career. People will tell me that the questions people asked, either in a good way or in a negative way, had an impression on them. If you have a good, thoughtful question that you thought about, absolutely. If you ask something totally lame and the person's like, is that really the question you're asking me? Take some time for that. Like write 5, 6 good questions.
Our friends in Discord, please join our community, by the way. You can find the information below. They ask questions when they learn about who the guest is. So we're going to start with JD or Jose Ramirez. Something that always bugged me, could my current location be a liability? I know there are people from different nationalities in the industry, but usually their story is something like, I had already moved into this country, or I got relocation by this big studio. They had significant experience under their belt. But what about those who are learning online and live in a country where there's no game or animation industry? Any advice?
When I think about location and if it's a liability, I always try to help people see and find opportunity where it is. But it is true that this can be a challenge. So remote roles are significantly declining in our industry. When I started tracking this 3 years ago, 25 to 30% of roles were remote. By that point, of course, it was 100% at the peak of COVID. Now, the remote roles have fallen from 25 to 30% to a range of 12 to 15%. The other thing that I would say is, I published that geographic analysis. And so one thing that you could do is you could definitely look at that analysis and Nanelle, you and I can talk and we can share that with your community if you want to share with anyone who wants. They can take a look at that and actually see for their country, for their region, for their city, how many jobs there typically are at any one point in time. So that's a good way to calibrate. Are there typically, how many jobs are there in your region? But I would say that certainly given the competitiveness of what is happening in the industry now, I definitely have had a honest conversation with many folks who've asked who are in an area with a very low number of jobs that like, this is the number of jobs typically. You may have to move if achieving this goal is that important to you.
I truly believe it's really hard to build a game, like creative part of the game remote, but it's much easier to do external development remote. If you're in a country that doesn't have a lot of on-site jobs, then getting a job at a external development company would be an easier thing. However, like for example, at Devoted Studios, we can't afford hiring junior talent being a remote company. Now, actually, we have a follow-up question from Ricardo. How do you see the future of remote work versus local for indie studios versus AAA? Actually, I think that's a really interesting segue to the previous question.
Definitely. I mean, look, I would say that the figures that I quoted of 12 to 15% remote, which is where we are, I see that remaining relatively stable. That percentage is slightly higher for indie studios versus AAA. And I've certainly seen AAA cutting back on remote more, but I would say there is not a huge amount of variance. I would say, to the best of my memory, even if you look at variance of studio size, there is probably not more of a variance range than 10 to 20% of roles being remote for studios of any size. It is definitely a pronounced movement that studios are prioritizing hybrid or in-person work these days.
Now we're going to move into one of my favorite parts, which is profile tips. I mean, we usually have our directors review the portfolios, but today we have a very extraordinary guest. So we're going to move into profiles. First of all, thank you everyone who shared their profiles. It takes vulnerability to be broadcasted online, but also I feel like in those moments people are more committed to where they want to be rather than committed to staying where they're at. So first of all, thank you so much for everyone who shared their profile. And Amir, let's roll. Let's see how we can help folks.
It's my pleasure to help. So I'm, again, taking a pretty quick look at these and giving kind of rapid fire tips. So looking at this for Dario, I'll kind of say quick things that I like and areas to maybe consider. I really like that there's a custom header here. Maybe you could put some text on it or put something interesting. Maybe if there's a link or something like that to your portfolio. I really love a custom banner, but combining it with something, a link, something like that is always pretty cool. I also see that he seems to have premium LinkedIn. If you have premium LinkedIn, you get a custom link that you can use. I would always take advantage of that and use the website link again to link to your portfolio, especially if you're an artist. The headline here is interesting, but it's a little bit too wordy. I generally recommend, if you can, keeping your entire headline to maybe a sentence of something that's kind of creative that grabs people's attention. If I go down here to posts, if you've recently posted on LinkedIn, you can feature posts that you've done in the past. So I might highlight some of those posts so people can see examples of the content that you create. The About section is okay. I definitely like that you put your portfolio and content. My recommendation is to usually make this more paragraphic, so it almost reads like a cover letter, and talk about all the experiences that you've done, what you're looking for. And so I think you're hitting the right points here, but I might write this a little bit more paragraphically like a cover letter. Finally, going down to the bullet points, I am glad that you have your roles populated and you have some bullets. Believe it or not, some people don't do that at all. I really love that you put your skills. As much as possible, I try to tell people to emphasize, if they can and it's not confidential, be more specific about the types of things you've worked on. What games did you work on? What specific things did you deliver? If there's any type of metrics in terms of the business impact that they delivered, highlight these. But I would say these bullets are generally pretty good. So I would say this is pretty good with some minor improvements like the ones I just cited.
Cool. Let's move on.
Willimus, thank you for sharing this. Again, let's start with similar feedback at the top. Really, really cool banner. Might add something to kind of catch people's attention. I would say I appreciate that you put this in English and you also put this. If you have a second language, that's great. I would say, again, like the other one, this is a little bit brief. I would think of this as a cover letter type format and maybe rewrite it as possible. That might make it a little bit more interesting. If I go down to experiences, again, I would think about being more specific about what you did. A common trap that people fall into with bullets for roles is you don't want to write the job description. You want to write a description of what you accomplished. So think of it this way. If the person looking at this is the hiring manager, yes, it's helpful to know what your actual skills are, but you already have listed what your skills are down here. You want them to think about the actual business impact and how, if they put you in a spot in their studio or in their company, what type of things that you do that would be directly relatable to what they're working on. I would also say that, again, for a few of these, they're more detailed than others where you have one bullet. I often tell people, if something is important enough to list under experience, you should give them all roughly the same amount of attention. So I wouldn't have one like Animus that has nothing and have another one like here that has like 3 bullets. I might make them more consistent. Let's go to Rainer here. Same feedback on the on the banner. Great graphic. Might put some text there. Same feedback. You have LinkedIn Premium. I would put a link to your portfolio. I think that the general, again, ideas you have here aren't bad. I would make it more detailed and paragraphic. I would also be clear on what type of opportunity you're looking for if you're looking for a job. I would, again, build this out in a more of a cover letter type format. I like that you have your website here, but instead of putting this here as well, I might just put it at the top in terms of your website. And for this, all of these are very, very short. You have just a few letters for each. I understand that part of this is because you have a lot of different freelance roles. I would find a way to maybe roll this up so there's not so many roles here. Looking through like 17 opportunities is a little bit difficult. I might maybe concentrate on a few, or maybe have a catch-all that kind of talks about all the freelance and contract work you've done. But that's just my opinion, and that might allow you to say a little bit more that's concrete about each one. Jose, I think this is actually a pretty cool banner. I think I'm cool with this. I love that you have a portfolio link. Perfect. I think this is a very good about section. It could be a little bit more detailed, but Jose, I think this is just about right. You talk about your foundation, you talk about your skills, you say what type of opportunities you're open to, and so forth. My one piece of advice is you might be more specific about what you're looking for. This is quite general. I tell people that imagine that someone gets one crack at looking at what you're looking for. If you're open to everything, you're at the same time open to nothing. You should always be specific about one, maximum two areas of work that you want to be a match for. Let's look at these bullets. These are, again, kind of general bullets. I might be more specific about things you worked on and accomplished. I think that being an ESL coordinator and ESL teacher is great, but I would say that it's probably going to be less relevant to the roles you're applying to than these other things you've done in art and rigging. I might find a way to put this at the bottom and to lift the things that you're actually doing in art to the top. I would also say similar. Yeah, one of the pieces of feedback earlier, you have like 6 or 7 different bullets here about being an ESL teacher. I might roll all of that up into just one. You should have one thing that is about ESL and being a professor or stuff like that, and everything else should focus on your art experience. Gustavo, again, nice banner. I might add some text or a link or something to that. Again, you have LinkedIn Premium, so I would have a link or something like that. I think that this is very short. I would, again, try to have a number of components to this. I would describe, what your background is. I would describe the experiences that you've done. I would describe what skills and projects you've achieved. I would describe what type of role you're looking for and so forth. And in terms of these are all just role descriptions. They don't even have any bullets for them. So I would make sure you add 2 or 3 very crisp bullets for every single job that you have that describes what you're doing. Let me see if there's anything else. I think that's basically it. So that's my feedback.
Last but not the least, we have some rapid questions for you. If you can share only one piece of advice with job seekers, what would it be?
The most important factor in you getting hired is relationship development with people who are making the hiring decision.
What was the worst advice about hiring you've ever heard?
People who want to hire people just because they have a certain number of years or experience or they've been at a company. No matter where someone's been or how long they've worked, you have to adjudicate them for fit and for quality. And that could be from the smallest place, the biggest place, and anywhere in between.
A middle-level artist with strong soft skills or a top-notch artist with bad character?
Always the person with good character. A bad character person will damage your team over time.
Strong portfolio or strong social media profile?
I would say strong portfolio, unless it's a role where relationships and that type of thing really matter. Maybe marketing, maybe business development, but otherwise I would focus on skills.
Being active on Discord or LinkedIn?
Ooh, I think it depends. I think for certain communities, being on Discord is very, very powerful. I would say for like a typical professional person, LinkedIn. I just think for hiring, LinkedIn is more important. It has a lot of flaws, but I still think for decision makers who hire, LinkedIn is the better place to be. I mean, ideally, I would say both, but if I had to choose one, LinkedIn.
Applying to all possible openings or focusing on 1 or 2?
If I had to choose one, I would say 1 and 2, but that's too few. Like I would say the best answer is you should apply to a lot less roles than you think. and spend a lot more time in brand and network development, especially because if I can say, companies all now have ATS systems and they see everything you apply to. So if you're just applying to everything, people will notice, and that's not a great look.
If an artist has two offers, one from a AAA studio and one from an indie studio, what would you suggest to choose, AAA or indie? Pay the same.
If I don't know anything to answer your question, I would say AAA because it'll probably look better on your resume. But the real answer is, I think the only thing that matters is, what is the fit that you feel like with the group that you're going to be working with? And even more importantly, what is the fit that you feel with your direct manager? Because in my experience, 90% of job satisfaction eventually will be the relationship you have with your direct manager.
Remote office or hybrid?
I'm obviously biased for remote because I think you can do most things in that setting. But I think the cop-out answer is, it depends what type of work you're doing. If you're in business development or finance, I truly think it makes no difference because you're either just crunching numbers or traveling all the time. I feel like if you're in production and making a game, I absolutely believe my colleagues with much more expertise that you get a better result if you're all in the office together on average. Although I know many studios that do it remote too.
What is worse, to be late for a job interview or forget the name of the art director who interviews you?
I think being late. So I have a lot of sympathy that different people not making excuses are good at different things. If I see your face, I will remember it for 50 years, but I forget names all the time. And that is absolutely a thing that some people just have trouble remembering names. So I don't think it's personal. One is a little bit of a capacity issue. I think the other one is completely within your control.
Ideally, rendered, super polished AI artwork or human artwork that requires some polishing?
It depends what type of AI. It depends if it's generative. There's a lot of qualifying things. But
this is rapid fire question.
I know. Human over AI.
1 year of chasing the work of your dream or a year of working at a job you don't like?
Definitely the job of your dreams. It's you'll have that. You can always do other stuff.
Working in video games or working at the factory?
Oh God, no. I mean, games always. It's worth it. I tell you, it's worth it.
Love it. Well, Amir, thank you so much. This was a fascinating conversation. I hope a lot of folks can learn a lot from this. And also, I'll drop in the comments the links to all of your stuff, your Discord, your socials. Please follow Amir. He's one of the gurus of this industry and how to get a job. I love, Amir, that you've been more honest and less, I feel like it has been enough of sad posting news. I feel like we need to take a course correction and being like, okay, this is the reality check. This is where we need to go. This is where we need to be. And the overall, let's move into a little bit positive while still being sympathetic of the experiences of everyone. But we need to take a pivot on what can we do with this now? What is the course? So I really love the course you've been taking recently. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for saying that, Nanelle. And you're right. I know one thing you and I both agree on and work towards every day is no matter what the reality is, we will do the best to give everyone their best shot. And that is the best shot at games. But more importantly, it's your best shot at having a job.